screen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, welcome to this evening's council meeting, Tuesday, September 22nd, 2020. Before I start, I'll remind council that this portion of the meeting is being recorded and live streamed to YouTube. I'll also remind council to speak clearly and project their voice when they're talking so people viewing at home can hear. Now I'll do a roll call of council for the benefit of the public watching. When I call your name, please wave at the camera, say here or present. And I, Mayor Shantz, am present and chairing this meeting. Councillor Martin.
Present.
Councillor McMillan.
Present.
Councillor Lambs.
Present.
Councillor Redekop.
Present.
And Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to reconvene in open session, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, second by Councillor Redekop. All those in favor? That's carried. Sorry, just a second while I get organized here. Okay, we're going to start the evening with a moment of silence, and I was trying to think of something profound to say, and there's just so much going on these days that could be profound. But I think it's most important for all of us as individuals to step back and take a collective deep breath as we see the number of COVID cases increasing and as we move into winter, and we need to find ways to stay grounded to the things that really matter as we strive to follow the guidelines that will keep us all safe. So let's just take a moment of silence as we begin this meeting and remember what is important to each of us. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There's no items to come forward from closed session. Are there any comments on the minutes with council minutes from September 1st and committee of the whole from September 15th? Can I have a motion to have them adopted if there are no changes? Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. There is no planning public. And now, just a second here again. So I want to introduce tonight's presentation with a bit of an introduction to a time that I hope we can do more of. And, you know, in thinking about some of the things going on these days, let's face it, for most of us, we or our ancestors have immigrated from elsewhere, often to escape persecution or to make a better life for families. And we all have family histories that we can share. We have our own ethnic groups to remind us of our history and our heritage. And at this point in history, we have an opportunity to think about two groups who have a heritage that's been broken, especially by Euro-Canadian settlers and leaders. Both the Black and Indigenous communities have a history of their families being broken time and time again, and those roots run deep. I can't imagine what it would be like to have my children taken away from me, or to have been taken away from my parents, or to have parents or grandparents who maybe didn't know how to parent because they were removed from their home to live in unlivable conditions. To have that heritage taken away and to hide from who you are or be in fear of dire consequences just about because of how you look. And these two communities right now are crying out for us to hear them. And we all have our roles to play. We need our activists to remind us to pay attention. We also need leaders who can see the big picture and ensure our decisions are getting to the root causes of today's biases, leaders who are wise and beneficial to the entire community. When family systems are destroyed, it plays havoc for years. Poverty, homelessness, and even mental health issues are exacerbated by lack of social supports to help people thrive. And we need to be wise and considered in our response. What works for one does not work for another. But what does work for all is mutual respect and consideration. So let's get to know our neighbors. So to facilitate that, I hope to have someone who we might not know present at various council meetings going forward. This week, I've invited Alice Penny from Bring On the Sunshine, and she has with her Jackie Carroll. So please welcome Alice and Jackie. Go ahead, ladies. So good to have you here.
Thank you. That was a very good introduction. Thank you. So I'm trying to see how I work this PowerPoint thing.
So there's a share screen. Steph or Jeff, can you?
Jackie, can you do the PowerPoint, do you think?
Person have it?
Sorry?
Does the tech person have it?
No, they don't have it. We're running it.
I can do it if you want to. Steph can do it if you want her to. Would you like her to do it?
I have it.
Okay, while she's getting ready, I'll just take this opportunity to say thank you for inviting us to chat a little bit with you. So my name is Alice Penny. I have lived in North America for over 20 years now. I'm passionate about community work, but I haven't always done community work. I think probably the first decade or so in North America, though, racism was real and you experienced things here and there, I still didn't really engage. However, for the past 10 years or so, I've been more involved in the community and actively speaking up. And part of that is because as I had children and they went into the school system, I started to look at the world and see the world through their innocence, and realize that I have a responsibility to maybe shape how they view themselves, and help them to translate, or help them not to take all the negative images or things that are thrown at them in the world. So when we talk about minority groups, I think a lot of the times, especially with Black people, the thought is it's the guy who's wearing a white thing and burning crosses at the night who's scary. But I think for me, I would beg to say, if you're in the KKK, I'm not breaking bread with you, but the things that are, or the situations that are more damaging is the people that we interact with in our everyday lives, who are not necessarily, they're not bad people or anything like that, but we all have different exposures. And so those friends that we have, or those non-racist people who sometimes say things that chip away at one's identity until you start to feel inferior, or you have to fight against that. So an example of that, whether it's, kids in the school, if, a teacher referring to skin color as a certain type of color, which doesn't relate to mine, or, our children being expected or being treated like they should excel in sports, but not in academics, or whether it's the looks of the grocery store, or or comments that are made, not meant to offend, but, from the perspective of the person who's saying it, it may not be meant to offend, but you never know how your words are received from the other side. And I've been in Amara for probably the past 4 years. And in that time, different, I've realized, is a very weighty world in this community, especially for the kids. Being different is not perceived as a good thing. And that, I think that goes beyond just the Black experience. So that being said, I wanted to share a little story with you today that speaks to why I think history matters, and why I tell the stories that I tell for my kids and for the greater community. Jackie, can you go to the next slide? So I was born in Zimbabwe, and in Zimbabwe, there is a site, a city, an ancient city that was built in the 11th century. This would have been before the colonial settlers, because they would have invaded Africa probably starting around the 1800s. So the amazing thing about this site is that everything that was built, the fortress, all the houses, were built by stones being laid on top of each other. There's no cement, but it's a full city. It was a thriving marketplace. Jackie, go to this next slide, please. Thank you. Yeah, and so, and on the outside, it had 2 walls for protection. So there was so much thought in how it was built and the structure. And this city is still standing today. And so the thought was, when the white settlers came, the thought was that they must have been some Europeans who came to settle there earlier than they did, earlier than the 1800s, because clearly the natives of this land could not have built such a city without help or aid from anybody else. However, though they didn't agree for any studies or archaeological digs to happen at the time, because I guess they didn't want to know the truth. And part of why they didn't agree to that was because within that city, in the tombs, were gold and other products. Jackie, next slide. And so in this map, I just highlighted a few areas where they had products that they found in Zimbabwe, which is right at the bottom of Africa, where products from China, stuff from Persia, Arabia, and other stuff from Northern Africa, which was evidence of travel that would have happened at the time. And so I tell the story and why does it matter to me today, or why does it matter to us today? A lot of the times, the narrative that the descendants of the African continent are being told is that we come from a place of savages. We didn't have any civilization until the European settlers came, and we had nothing, and basically nothing good comes out of it. So part of what I aim to do, or part of what I wish the community to do, is to tell more stories that starts to change that narrative, because this is a story that starts to give my children, or people who look like me, a story beyond what is told in the media, a story about our ancestors and our heritage that speaks to the accomplishments of people who look like us, and that our history did not start at slavery or colonization, but our history existed before that. And if we don't reclaim that, or if we don't pass it on to our kids, a lot of what they end up learning is the history from the perspective of people who don't look like us, but at the disadvantage of us, because like in the case of Great Zimbabwe, a lot of research was made, but it was always made from a European perspective. So the consensus was that there is no way that the natives could have built that. But so I would love for us as a community, and with all our differences, to be able to tell such stories, to be able to celebrate each other. And I don't think that me telling my story in any way it should be taken as a negative approach on any other culture, but it is just a celebration of what my heritage is, something that my kids can then relate to and help them with their identity, and as they grow up in a society that only speaks of descendants of African of the African continent as in poverty, savages, and all the other negative context that there is. So that was the story that I wanted to share with you today. I hope that sort of gives maybe an insight into why we want to tell our stories, and it's not to attack others, but it's to reclaim our own heritage and to pass a sense of identity to our children. I'll hand it over to Jackie now.
Oh, that's the old slideshow. I'm going to come out of this. Screen sharing is like my nightmare. Yeah, so thank you so much for having us here today. Like Alice has done a really good job of explaining why we as Bring on the Sunshine exist, basically. Many of you know my husband, DJ Carroll. I moved to Elmira when we got married about 5 years ago, although I too am originally from Zimbabwe, although I don't look it. And as part of my family story, my mother is Canadian, my father's British, but they brought up their family in Africa. So I've always thought of myself as an African. Finding out later in life that our family story actually includes Indigenous heritage as well, which is something that I'm exploring. But it's kind of a shock coming to Canada, even as a white person, and seeing how we live here. Like there's many amazing, wonderful things about being here, which is why we choose to be here. But there are also some things that I noticed that we're missing because I've grown up somewhere else. And what I'm missing is that a lot of the stories that are not being told, and I'm seeing like an emptiness. So for myself, coming to Elmira, realizing that there were Indigenous people here before the white settlers came. All of us, except for Alice, of course, have white settler heritage. And also the Black people who were here. There's many stories about the Queensbush community just down the road at Hawkesville. And, I look around and I'm like, where are these stories being told here in our community, here in Elmira? And I come in as an African, I come in as a white African, which is very exotic or seems very exotic. But actually, when I have conversations with people in Elmira, there are so many stories that seem to step outside of the narrative that you would expect, because Elmira's kind of built a story of itself as being like Mennonite. And obviously that's a huge part of the story who Elmira is. But I wonder if there's a lot of stories that we're missing. I've met people who've traveled to all kinds of amazing places, lived in all kinds of amazing places. I think, my husband being the high school drama teacher, I think we have the only rainbow flag that I've seen on the front step in Elmira. And we've had any number of people come and make comments to us. We've had kids like leave notes on our doorstep, so it's like the rainbow flag is something that's like a little bit touchy in Elmira, almost like it's a sensitive topic, but there's so many people who align or identify with that flag, You know, so like when I look around Elmira, I look around the community that we live in, I really would love to know more of the stories that have not yet been told as part of this community. And what we love to do at Bring on the Sunshine is storytelling. And that's part of why we're here tonight. Thank you so much for inviting us to come and tell our stories. And we look forward to hearing some more of the stories in this community through your council meetings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to give us just a brief synopsis of Bring on the Sunshine? One of you?
Yes, sure. So Bring on the Sunshine, we started, the first event we ever held was Africa Camp, which was a camp for kids. And again, it was born out of the need that we saw in the community, especially from immigrant kids in the African community who didn't see any positive images of Africa, and to some extent were now going around and saying they're Caribbean or they're from the islands because they didn't want to be associated with the continent of Africa because they didn't know anything about it except what's in the news, which is never great. So that was the first event that we did, which has been ongoing since then. And then from that, I think probably the next year after that, we did the festival, Bring on the Sunshine Festival, Family Day Festival. And again, that was born out of a need in the community because a lot of us were recent migrants to the community. And that was around about the time when Family Day was first made official in Canada. And most of us didn't have other family to speak of except your immediate family. And in the African cultural context, family is always more than just your immediate family. It's a community of people living and doing life together. And so that's sort of how the festival came about. And it's evolved over the years based on just the world also evolving and the needs of the community. So we now run it as we do leadership program. It's open to everyone, but we emphasize kids of African descent and try to provide opportunities for them which wouldn't necessarily be available for them in other spaces. And we've ventured into, over the past 8 years, maybe, we've done presentations in schools. And again, that was born out of the need that was in our community, because we had a lot of parents who would come to us and say, this situation happened at my son's school. How do we address it? How do we talk to the kids? How do we move this forward and help our children who are in the school system? And because I have kids myself who are in the school system, and so were others who are on the Bring on the Sunshine board and team. So we started going into schools and doing presentations and talking to the kids and just teaching a little bit of the heritage and connecting with kids that way. And a lot of the times just them seeing people who look like them in that space in a position where they're sharing some of that history has been meaningful to them. So I think that's about we've done other pop-up events throughout the years as well, but our main focus is youth and has been youth and children in the school system. Jackie, did I miss anything?
Just that we celebrated our 10th year just before we went into lockdown.
Yeah, we snuck
Yes.
in.
It's been a tough year for any kind of event.
Yes, it definitely has.
Thank you very much for sharing. And I love this story about the village in Zimbabwe.
Thank you.
To the rich heritage, and we tend to think we're pretty smart here in the 21st century, but you look at history from all over the world, and
Right. Yeah.
So I really appreciated that story.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you, to Jackie and Alice. You guys put on a pretty well-attended event in Elmira last winter, was it about a year and a half ago? And I was wondering if we get through this pandemic, are there plans to do that again and to continue that event?
Do you want to take that one, Jackie?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if you're all aware, but Bring On the Sunshine hosted what we consider two inaugural events for Elmira. We actually hosted Elmira's first ever African dance workshop. And we also hosted the Now Now Cafe, which was supported by you guys, by the township. We were able to hold it at the WMC. And it was an event that was designed to bring together some of the more culturally diverse members of the community here in Elmira. And there was a little bit of music. We had some local artists, myself included, who were showing artworks. We had some food and coffee donated. And it was just like a very sort of comfortable, easygoing hangout time. But it showcased a group of people who don't typically come together in a public space. Because what happens is diverse communities tend to stick where they're comfortable and they don't, feel like they're sticking out, which is at home or in private gatherings. And by doing this, we really wanted to draw people out and to be able to say, hi, we're here. We're part of this community. We want to contribute. We want to celebrate. We had over 60 people come. And it was quite interesting because, of course, the hockey crowd is coming in and out. And we were a very different gathering for the WMC and for Elmira. But it was very positive, very welcoming. We had some amazing conversations. And we definitely want to do this again. God willing, we can all get together in a group of more than 10 people one day soon.
We're all hoping for that day to come sooner later, aren't we? Anyone else? No? Okay, thank you so much for sharing, ladies. That was a great start to what I hope we can do with some of the other groups that you talked about as well. And we'll have some conversation about how best to communicate with some of them, and we'll be in touch. So thank you very much. You're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting, or you can sign yourself out, whichever you'd like. So,
Thank you.
okay. Council will move on to the rest of the agenda then. We have no delegations and no unfinished business, no consent items, so a motion that council convenes in committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Monahan, seconded by Councillor Sean. So all those in favor? That's carried. Motion that the summary of the recommendations of Committee of the Whole dated September 15th be adopted as follows. We have a request for exemption from purchasing policy for the municipal drain maintenance. We have a election 2022 report on council composition and ward boundary review. We had a procedural bylaw update, a development charges, deferral payment and interest, automated speed enforcement report, a request for rural COVID testing, and minutes from the technical advisory group. We have a mover and a seconder for those. Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Redikoff. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to staff reports, I'll call on Deputy Clerk Deb Smith to give us an overview of our first report, which is the 2021 draft council meeting schedule. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz. I'm just going to load up the 2020 draft 2021 meeting schedule for you. Should be on your screen now. So we usually, staff usually bring forward a schedule for council to consider in the last quarter of the year, so that you can plan ahead for next year. We try to avoid meetings after staff holidays, March break, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference. We also try to provide a 4-week break for council over the summer. So the schedule in front of you does do that. I'd also like to point out 2 things that are a little bit different. We've planned for a special council meeting on August 10th. That's just after the proposed summer break, which would allow for ratification of business after the break. And just because of timing, we're proposing 4 meetings back to back in late November, early December, to allow for time over Christmas. If council wants to approve the calendar tonight, staff will work with Rogers Cable to find dates for televised meetings and bring back an updated schedule with those dates. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions? Councilor McMillan? Oh, you're muted, Scott.
Turned my camera on, forgot to turn my mic on. Thank you, Mayor. Not sure this is going through you to staff, but maybe just to you, to council. I was wondering if we've talked about this a bunch. I think it's something that we really need to do. A couple of special council meetings, May, June, August, September, about the budget so that we can set the strategic direction, work with staff to set the strategic direction for the budget so that the budget reflects council's values and we don't simply wait for staff to bring a budget that they're guessing what we want. So I'm not sure if council wants to discuss adding some extra meetings for increased budget input ahead of the process.
Council? So Scott, you're suggesting we have a special meeting dedicated to budget in that to bring someone.
That would be my hope. I think when we talk about our role as counselors, an extra, even if it was 2 meetings, I would call it a great start at the start of the process. Even if it was, 1 before the summer break and 1 after the summer break to give staff a little bit more direction. I think when we're talking about our job as counselors, a couple extra meetings, you call it 4 extra hours of work a year. It doesn't sound like a lot. So yeah, that's what I was asking if council wanted to consider it.
Sorry, I wasn't looking at the screen. Councillor Redicott, if anyone else put their hand up, you'll have to wave it again.
Yeah, I would agree with Scott. I'd appreciate 2 meetings, one in the spring and one after we get back from the summer to help in the budgetary process, because I think it's, as he said, it's important about who we are as a council to give direction to the township.
Okay. Councillor Mohan?
I'm not opposed to more meetings or more work or more hours on talking about council direction, but we did do this last year. I was looking forward to hearing what people had to say and what kind of direction they wanted to give last year, and it wasn't a whole lot. So if Councillor McMillan wants to perhaps put an outline of the topics of discussion and actually come with some ideas, then that'd be great. But not everybody participated. Not everybody had a whole lot of ideas to give direction to staff. And if you're not going to think about things before the meeting, then you waste our time. You're wasting staff time doing this. So I am all for having a discussion and all the different ideas that we have as a council to give that direction. But last time it just didn't happen, which is why it was limited to 1 meeting. I'd like to see, what the framework for that discussion is going to be, and a commitment from every council member to contribute.
think it was limited to one meeting because people didn't want a second meeting. Go ahead, Councillor McMillan.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Through you, that meeting that we had, it was called a budget meeting. It was scheduled specifically at the request of some members of council after the first budgetary process, where Councillor Merlihan, you had gone through and found, line items that didn't match up between the budget and the actuals, and we called it the contingency reserve meeting. It was an overarching meeting on the agenda, but it ended up that we spent 2 hours talking about the reserves and contingency reserves and contingency budgeting. And we spent 2 hours on that. And we got to a place where council gave a clear direction to staff, and then this year's budget reflected that direction. And at the end of that 2 hour meeting, we asked for some members of council asked for another meeting because we didn't move beyond the contingency planning into any other areas of budgeting. And that was rejected by a 3-2 vote. So I push back strongly that nothing was accomplished. We accomplished what we set out to accomplish regarding the contingency reserve. It took longer than I think maybe we had expected, or maybe it didn't, but it took the full time of the meeting. And then when we went to move beyond that, we needed more time, we needed more meetings, and we voted not to have that. So I will push back on your comments on that nothing was accomplished. I think that your points about not wasting our time, not wasting staff's time, that council is prepared and that we all participate, I think is a good one. And I agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
I heard from 3 councillors. Councillor Shantz.
Yeah, thank you. Through you. I too would like to see some kind of an agenda or format so that we are all talking or discussing the same types of topics. I'm not sure what a meeting like that would look like, so I would like to see something ahead of time. Probably not coming prepared because I was prepared to talk about budget numbers and not necessarily the full picture. So I think Scott is maybe talking about something outside the budget, or maybe I'm getting that wrong, but I'd like to see something fleshed out a little bit so we know what we're actually agreeing to.
Councillor McMillan, I'm just going to ask Councillor Martin if he had anything to add first because he hasn't spoken yet.
Well, I'll be part of any meeting you want to have, but I want to see an agenda. Otherwise, we're just going to spend a night spinning our wheels. And then the other thing, though, when we limit a budget increase of 2% and we have a lot of things that we have to do, we don't have a lot of room to go down another road and say we're going to give staff direction, do this, do that. And I'm not interested in going off some way where it doesn't benefit people. But if you're going to have meetings, I'll be part of that.
Okay. Without getting into too much of the budget discussion right here, because this is about the schedule, Councillor.
Could I move that we approve the schedule as recommended by staff tonight, and then ask staff to explore the opportunity to add 2 more meetings, one in the spring, one in the fall, and a draft agenda of what those meetings are. So we can approve the schedule as written tonight, and then with that motion, ask staff to bring back, a possible couple other meetings with a draft agenda that we could approve or reject at a later date that's outside the schedule that's presented tonight.
Okay, and I guess I would add to that if when the time came, if we didn't need that extra meeting, if we had time in our regular schedule to fit it in, then we would do that. Thank you, Councillor Shantz. Are you seconding it? No?
I just have a comment and wondering how staff is going to know what we want in the agenda for that. I think that's putting some pressure on staff without some guidance. I'm not sure whether Councillor McMillan could give more guidance to staff for that agenda.
Well, I wonder if council is okay with just having 2 placeholder meetings. And we'll get agendas together prior to the meeting and 3 weeks before or 4 weeks before or sometime during the spring quarter, we can decide what we want that agenda to look like, if we can have that kind of leeway. Is there a seconder then for Councillor Shantz? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. So schedule is approved. Just find a couple more tentative meetings for us to do some budget work. Thank you. Randall drain request for improvement. Mr. Smith, I think you're up again.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So staff received a request for improvement of the Randall drain from the region of Waterloo International Airport to allow for a runway expansion. Because this is a municipal drain that services other private properties, both upstream and downstream, any improvements to the drain must be done under Section 78 of the Drainage Act by an engineer's report. The airport has scheduled an aggressive timeline, but we think this is possible for 2 reasons. First, because the airport has been in contact with regulatory bodies to get those approvals started. And secondly, because they've also already started their design work. To support the timeline, staff are recommending that we exempt the selection of an engineer from the purchasing bylaw, that council appoint Paul McIntyre from RJ Burnside to write an engineer's report, and also that we request that Mr. McIntyre complete the report expeditiously in collaboration with the airport. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to Jeff. Is there going to be any possibility for public input at a meeting somewhere along the line prior to that report?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, yes, there will be public input. We'll likely have virtual meetings, although there may be the opportunity, depending on how things are going with COVID, to have a meeting, an on-site meeting at the drain.
Go ahead, Larry.
So part of that report, does the engineer talk to the public one-on-one, or is it just through the public meeting?
Through you again, Mayor Shantz. This one might be a little different because the airport is driving the expansion, the improvement, which could be a change in course or a enclosure of the existing drain. Because it's all the anticipated changes are on airport property, it might be a little different. But yeah, we'll definitely have opportunity for public input. I'm not sure if the engineer will meet with individual landowners if their properties are infected by the changes.
Anyone else? Councillor Rohan?
I'll move the recommendation as written.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Martin, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And this, the next one is a correction to the Randall drain. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to attempt to bring up my screen again here, or your agenda package again. There we go. I think that looks good. So this is, just to be clear, this is a correction for the maintenance of the Randall drain, a maintenance project different than the improvement project that the airport just asked for. At the last meeting, council considered a report by myself, and this is to correct an error. Just so you can see in the report there, or the memo there, The previous report showed a percentage cost billed to landowners in Cambridge. This memo provides correction to that. So you can see on your screen that while Woolwich does pay, property owners within the township of Woolwich do pay a significant portion of a lot of the drain. Cambridge, there are residents in Cambridge or property owners in Cambridge that will have to pay for this work as well. Because of that, so the township can bill the city of Cambridge, a bylaw has been prepared to allow the city to be invoiced. Also, to respond to council's previous questions, we calculated the cost for township lands and roads for the maintenance activities, and that would be just under $9,500. So that answers that question. This memo doesn't provide a recommendation. Rather, a bylaw has been placed in your agenda tonight to authorize the work and the billing of the city of Cambridge. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? No, I don't see any, so when that comes up in the bylaws, that'll be the time that we pass it. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay, next report is Red 5 contribution agreement, and Ms. Morris. Here you are, welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Hope that you guys are all doing well. I just wanted to share with you a request. We were approved for a 30% funding contribution through OMLAFRA's Rural Economic Development, or RED, program for an art project in downtown Elmira in an effort to increase foot traffic to the businesses within the BIA boundaries. The application was submitted in February, and we were notified of our final approval on August 24th. The arts project's total budget is $27,250, which will pay for several murals and/or sculptures in pre-identified opportune locations in downtown Elmira. And of the total project budget, I'm requesting council approval of a $2,800 contribution towards this project from the economic development budget in 2021. The balance of the funding will come from the downtown Elmira BIA, Wellington Waterloo Community Futures, and of course the RED program. The project requires mayor and clerk's authorization tonight, so the organizing committee can start planning for a spring 2021 start. The project is set to be complete by August 2021. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Through you to Jenna. Did you say that there are locations that have already been chosen for the murals? And if so, can you tell us where those are?
So there are 10 to a dozen pre-identified locations from the downtown Elmira BIA's community improvement plan. A couple, so they're all within the downtown core. A couple of them I can mention are, one is on the Sip and Bite building beside, across from the bank there, TD, right downtown. There's other business walls that are also identified. Some of them are right at the lights at the Shoppers Drug Mart.
Thank you. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Ms. Morris, will any of the artists be local artists that are contributing to this project?
Yeah, the hope is to, so as part of the planning, sorry, through you, Mayor Shantz, the hope is to get as many local artists as possible. And so we would start the conversations this winter should council approve our contribution. We would, through that, we'll be doing a call out to artists, working with the downtown BIA and community members to try and get as many local mural artists and sculpture artists as we possibly can.
Thank you. Anyone else? Would someone like to move the recommendation? Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Redicott. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other business? I guess the first thing on the agenda is the mayor's report on regional matters. I guess one of the things that happened since we were speaking of the airport is that we've come to an agreement with Pivot Airlines which is a startup to provide service to, let me see if I get this right. It's Windsor, Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, I think. And we're hoping that that's going to be up and running this fall or early 2021. So we're quite excited about partnering with Pivot and look forward to getting some new routes and getting a little more activity at the airport. Council, any reports? No? Not much happening these days, right? Outstanding activity list? Nothing? Okay. Motion that the following bylaws be introduced and read a first and second time. And those are, well, I'll read them out since we're live streaming. A bylaw to provide for the maintenance and repair of municipal drain number 2 in Woolwich Township and Mapleton Township. A bylaw to provide for the maintenance and repair of the Randall Municipal Drain, Woolwich Township and the City of Cambridge. A bylaw to govern the proceedings of council and committees of council. A bylaw to authorize the execution of a rural economic development program agreement with the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. A bylaw to, I believe that should be lift reserves for Birdland Developments Limited, South Parkwood Boulevard and Timber Trail Road, Elmira. A bylaw to confirm all actions and proceedings of council on September 22nd. Mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Shantz, seconded by Councillor Monahan. All those in favor? It's carried. Motion that Committee of the Whole rise and report to Council. Moved by Councillor McMillan, seconded by Councillor Redikoff. All those in favor? Carried. Motion that Council confirms and adopts the proceedings of Committee of the Whole. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Monahan. All those in favor? It's carried. There were 5 pieces of correspondence received. Loyalist Township resolution on ferries, City of Kitchener resolution on a tree significance program, resident of Norfolk correspondence on illicit cannabis grow-ops, Township of Amherstburg on the AODA website compliance extension request, and Town of Amherstburg request for consideration of amendments to Bill 108, the Ontario Heritage Act. Does anyone want to speak to any of those? There's no public notice, no notice of closed meetings, and no notice of motion. So motion that the following bylaws in the hands of the clerk be read a third time and finally passed, that they be numbered as bylaw number 64-2020 to 67-2020, and that they be signed by the mayor and clerk and sealed with a corporate seal. And those are the ones that were read before. Mover and a seconder, Councillor Shantz and Councillor McMillan. All those in favor? That's carried. Unless anyone has anything else, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor McMillan, Councillor Redikoff. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
See you soon. What happened there? This jerk.
We forgot to remind people to wait for a minute till we close.